What is up, everybody? Welcome to Pub Sports Radio and the DFS Picks and Prediction Show. Be sure to tune in every Tuesday, 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, where me, Weezy, and now AJ will break down the upcoming card from a DFS perspective and give our predictions on the fights as well. Also, be sure to leave a like. Also, subscribe here to Pub Sports Radio, getting really close to that 10K subs on Pub, so that'd be sweet to hit that in the near future. Make sure you subs so you not miss out on all the content throughout the week, all the other sports we do here on Pub. Also, go check out Stat Diggers, where me and Uncle Weezy go live every Sunday. We went live, I think, like 2 weeks ago at this point, breaking down the card, so go check that out if you have not yet. But on the show, as always, we're going to go back and forth through the panel. We're going to give our favorite fight to target, our favorite fight to fade, fighter to fade, favorite dog, favorite GPP play, favorite cash play, favorite value play, favorite dart throw. We'll give our quick picks. We'll give out our lineups to see who is going to win this week. We'll talk about who won 2 weeks ago. And yeah, should be a very fun show. So first, I'll kick it off to AJ. AJ, you are new here. Really thankful for you to be on the show. Really sharp guy. What is up? Are you looking forward to this card and looking forward to being on the show?
Oh, hell yeah. Looking forward to both, man. I'm super thrilled to be chopping up with you guys. 3 sharp minds, 3 unique minds. We're going to just tackle this card, man. 15 fights creates for a good opportunity to be contrarian for Draftkings, potentially some disagreement, but that's all good stuff because, thinking along the same lines as everybody else just, leads to a lot of flooding at top if that core comes through that everybody is on. But, we got a lot of close fights for the betting odds. I'm curious to hear what Uncle Weezy's ass shaving of the week is with a few colossal favorites here. But, yeah, a lot of things to look forward to, listeners. And, let's do this.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Really curious. There's a ton of options this week for ass shavings. Uncle Weezy, what is up, Weezy? I know you had a great week off, nice relaxing week off. Are you glad to be back?
Man, yeah, I'm glad to be back. I was just saying to AJ before the show started, after this week, man, there's no weeks off for us UFC cappers until Thanksgiving. So we are going to be grinding it out, man. And yeah, very interesting card coming up here. I had a great card last week. My ass shaving of the week was underdog, Molly McCann, and she came through with flying colors for me. So looking to build on that this week, make some more money this week. We got a really interesting card here, the much wider prices than we're used to seeing over the last couple of weeks. We got Sarukian 9,600 when you could have got Jack Shore last week for 9,100. So we're going to have to be a little bit, we're going to have to find some picks on the lower half of this rung of the ladder and figure out how we're going to fit in some of these top salaries. So should be a really interesting show. Looking forward to chopping it up with you guys.
Yeah, it's an interesting slate. Like last time we had fights about 2 weeks ago, we had a 9-fight card. Now we have a 15-fight card. So that completely changes up lineup construction. So I'm definitely curious to hear your guys' thoughts on that. And then last but not least, Luke, what is up with you? Are you looking forward to this card?
Yeah, man, it's definitely interesting to all your guys' points. I think there's definitely some volatility on here, some big favorites. Should definitely be a fun one. It was nice to have the week off. Took a few days not watching tape, which was kind of nice. Reset and recalibrate and ready to get back after it.
Yeah, bittersweet on the weeks off. If I feel like you definitely need them, definitely need to refresh a little bit. And then again, like Saturdays, I really did not know what to do with myself on Saturday. So do you want to shout out the chat real quick and then we'll get to it? Ahmed in the chat. What's up, guys? What is up, Ahmed? Good to see you. Brady, good to see you as well. We got Clint. What's up, boys? This is going to be a fun card for DFS. I agree. I love the big slate as well. And then JSJ23. Saw a lineup for tonight. Appreciate that, JS. Thank you for hanging out. So I say we get right to it, and let's start, as always, with the fight to target. And let's start with Uncle Weezy. Uncle Weezy, what is your fight to target for UFC Vegas 37?
Yeah, I didn't overthink this one too much. I'm going to go with the main event, Smith Spann. We got the second best fight doesn't go to decision prop. It's a 5-round fight. Both of these guys are giving up more than 3 points, 3 DraftKings points a minute outside of wins and losses. So that's actually, they're both fairly poor defensively. So, and then we're also looking at a chance that both of these guys are going to have the ability to grapple here because Smith has terrible takedown defense and Spann's takedown defense isn't much better than 60%. So, I think that this is a really good fight to target. It's 5 rounds too. So, I really do see this being a high scoring fight with a really high probability of finishing. And even if it doesn't, you get 5 rounds, you get 25 minutes instead of 15. So it's kind of a no brainer. This is just an easy one. Own this one heavily if you're going to be multi-entering.
Yep, definitely agree with you there. Luke, what is your favorite fight to target on this slate?
Yep, I'm going right with Uncle Weezy as well on the main event with Smith and Spann. I mean, their fights end inside the distance 77% of the time since 2016. Weezy hit on some of my big points as well. The total's also set at under 2.5, right around pick'em. So I mean, just based on general odds, the fight's projected to end in the first half of the fight 50% of the time. So there's merit to that. I think another interesting nugget as well is that Spann's only been out of the second round twice in his last 15 fights. So, generally an early finisher. I have defensive issues with both. Both are primary finishers as well. It's definitely a fight that I want to have heavy exposure to, as I just don't really see many scenarios of this one hitting the cards unless they kind of just, stand and stare at each other. So I want heavy exposure here. I like the main to target.
Yep, definitely with you there. I do think this does finish inside the distance one way or another. AJ, are you with Weezy and Luke? Do you like the main event? And then what is your favorite fight to target here?
I think the recommendation is solid. I'm actually going to pivot over to the Buckley versus Arroyo fight. I think that's a little bit sneakier, and it's actually, to my surprise, much more likely to end inside the distance. At least that's where the odds currently sit. Again, recording this here on Tuesday, things are subject to change, but you got the over 1.5 rounds. It's set at a pick 'em. And, typically Buckley is a finish or be finished type of guy. He goes out there, he brawls in the pocket, and he's got knockout power. But on the flip side, we've seen him knocked out more than once by Kevin Holland, by D. Chirico, and even on the regional scene. Arroyo is a guy that I don't think he has a large ceiling in the UFC. Takedown defense and cardio specifically are big holes in his game, but he's a really dangerous kicker. And just seeing Buckley hurt often, and we see Buckley hurt guys often, I do think that there's some potential here that we could see a finish here either way. And I do think that there's a chance that both these guys go under own. I don't see a reason why people would want to target Arroyo coming off of 2 losses in the UFC where he did not score well. And even Buckley, I mean, we see this time and time again with these hyped prospects. People are all on the hype train, they lose, and then people are all off of them. So I'm interested to see how the market reacts with Buckley, but we got other good options in his range. I think that'll take away from some of his ownership. And interestingly enough, I think it's a buy low spot on both guys.
Yep, definitely agree there. I think it, like you said, it has the widest fight doesn't go to decision line. I think I saw it like minus 360. So yeah, definitely a fight that has potential to end inside the distance. Arroyo, we'll talk about him more a little bit later, but he's definitely somebody that interests me from his price point. I think he's like 6,900. For me, I like all of what you guys said, but I'm going to actually agree with you guys that I'm going to go with Smith versus Spann. Fight doesn't get a decision is minus 240. And I like what Clint brought up here because that's kind of how I see it. I think it's going to be early Spann or late Smith. I can see Spann having a ton of success. I think he can go to the wrestling. I think he can exploit the horrible takedown defense of Smith, the non-existent takedown of Smith. The problem I have is what happens when this fight gets extended. What happens if this gets to the 3rd round, the 4th round, the 5th round? At that point, I'd start to favor Smith. So I am personally predicting Ryan Spann to get an early finish. That's why I'm kind of more high on him, which is crazy to see the price tags on the two. Ryan Spann 7,100. Anthony Smith, 9,100. You're getting a $2,000 savings on Ryan Spann, a guy that I think is going to be winning minutes up until he's not. I think, Anthony Smith's path to victory is basically getting beat up until Ryan Spann either makes a mistake late in the fight or ends up slowing down. So, yeah, I'm pretty high on Ryan Spann in general, especially at that price point. But the fight as a whole, I think, is very solid at target. I think, like Clint said, early Spann, late Smith. Any other things that stuck out to you guys? All right, so we will move on, and we will go with our fight to fade, and let's start with Weezy. Weezy, what is your fight to fade for UFC Vegas 37?
Yeah, the fight I'm going to fade is probably going to be the fight I'm least likely to watch as well, and that's going to be Goldie Whitmire. Actually, both of these girls score pretty well minutes, DraftKings points per minute wise. They're both pretty good scorers, and they both give up a decent amount of points. But the problem is it's the second lowest inside the distance prop on the slate next to Pennington Kianzad. But I just see Pennington Kianzad potentially having a chance to have more control time positions and grappling. This spot here just seems to be that it's going to be all striking. It's almost definitely going to go to decision. And on a 15-fight slate, you're probably not going to be optimal with a fighter that goes to decision. You got to figure that you're going to have 5 or 6 guys that, finish inside the distance in order to be optimal. I don't see one of these ladies finishing. So yeah, I'm going to avoid the fight altogether. It's a 1-800 gambler fight for me.
Yep. Can't disagree there. Luke, what is your fight to fade for this week?
Yeah, I'm going Kianzad Pennington, second worst inside the distance line on the card. Both girls proven to be extremely tough. not historic finishers. Their fights hit the cards 85% of the time since 2016. Even just looking at the last, few times both girls have been finished, Pennington by Nunes, in the 5th round. The fact that she was even able to go 5 rounds with Nunes, I think says a whole lot. Kianzad, couple submission losses, one to Raquel Canuto, high-level black belt, and then she got subbed by Macy Chiasson, but that was also up a weight class at 145 pounds as well. So that's really the only times these girls have been finished, in the last 5 years or so. I definitely think there's going to be some bigger exchanges in this fight. But I just don't see any finishing equity outside of maybe a Pennington sub, which is probably anywhere between like 10 to 15% implied. I just think this fight goes over at a pretty high clip, and kind of to Weezy's point, we're looking for primarily finishes here. I just don't see much finish equity from either girl.
AJ, what is your favorite fight to fade for this week?
I'm going to agree with Luke there. I don't see a lot of upside with the Pennington Kianzad fight. I mean, and it's not like Kianzad's one of those underdogs. It's like, she's got win equity and not a whole lot of others do for the betting odds. There's plenty of underdogs with win equity and higher upside in win scenarios. So I could see Kianzad winning. She's a high volume striker, but that's literally her upside in a win. Luke pointed out the possible sub from Pennington. That's really the only way I could see her winning. With a finish and a big score. Maybe she rocks Kianzad because Kianzad doesn't have the best durability, doesn't have the best defense, but Pennington historically not a big hitter. So again, it's kind of just relying on a sub. And when she only has landed like one takedown at most in her, past several consecutive fights dating back to Elizabeth Phillips, we got to look at the probabilities here. And I just don't think the probabilities of this fight, the winner of this fight, putting up a big score are all too high. So I'm more than okay being very underweight to this fight.
Sounds good. I'm going with the same here. Kianzad versus Pennington. Yeah, I think Pennington has a good shot of winning this one, but you take a look at it. She's 8,700. If she does win, maybe she gets a takedown. Maybe she gets some control time. Like Luke said, I don't think there's much finishing upside on either fighter. And even if, Kianzad wins the fight, I still don't think she's going to score well. She's obviously not going to take down Pennington. She's not going to get control time. I think if she does win, it's probably a 3-round decision where she outstrikes her on the feet. And at that price point on a 15-fight slate, I just really don't see myself getting there. So I'm with you guys. I think those are both some really good fights to fade there. Any other fights for this one here?
I had a hard time picking a fight to fade this week. 15-fight card, you'd think there'd be a couple that you wanted to just completely ignore. But even I have a hard time believing that I'd completely ignore the one that I chose, because they can both score over 3 points a minute. And even in a decision, that can get you 80 points. In a cash lineup, that might be useful. But yeah, I had a hard time picking a fight to fade. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really. I thought this one was pretty clear fade for me. But the Whitmire one I'm not too interested in, and then there was one other one I wasn't too interested in. But I think those are 2 solid fights to fade though. But I say we move on. Before we do so, I want to shout out the chat. We have the Gaming Wolf in here saying he's on Spann the General taking notes. Gary in the chat, Jesse in the chat, Clint in the chat. We have JS still in the chat here. Brian and Joshua, thank you guys so much for hanging out. If you guys can leave a like, also subscribe to the channel, that'd be much, much appreciated. We are now going to get to our fight to fade. So fighter to fade, we'll start with Luke. Luke, what is your fighter to fade for this week?
Yeah, I'm not going too contrarian here. Pretty obvious. Yagos at 6.6. Worst inside the distance line on the card. Worst round 1 line up the card. I guess his path to victory is maybe via wrestling. That's traditionally how he's winning his fights, but I highly doubt that he'll be able to have any sort of extended wrestling success on Saryukin, considering Saryukin actually put up more resistance in the wrestling to Islam Makhachev more than I think anybody else has historically. Maybe he clips him, but I just think that general win equity of him is so low in this fight. Obviously, the odds indicate that as well. Saryukin's roughly 90% implied to just win the fight. In general, kind of getting back to the whole 15-fight slate type of deal. I don't think you want to just be throwing away roster spots on this card, and I think Yagos is kind of just a throwaway, and you want to have as much availability as you can. So at 6.6, I just don't really see much merit to him, even as a dart throw.
Yeah, I mean, you can't argue that, really. I think Sarukian does get it done. For my fighter to fade, it's going to be Raquel Pennington, 8,700. Talked about it a little bit. I mean, there's just so many fighters I like more than Pennington in this fight. And like I said, if she does win, maybe she gets a takedown here or there. Maybe she gets some control time. But I'd much rather go up and pay for these. This 9K range is crazy. This is probably one of the best 9K ranges I've ever seen. Like Armin Sarukian's up there, Montel Jackson's up there, Tony Gravely's up there. Even Aaron Blanchfield draws some interest for me as well. Ion Cuțelaba has a ton of upside. So for me, I don't know if it's the same for you guys, but in terms of lineup construction for me, I'm kind of looking at a Stars and Scrubs lineup construction where I'm going up, I'm getting, 1, 2, 3 of these studs even, and then going down. And there's just so much value on this slate where I was actually able to pretty much make any lineup I wanted with going up here and getting some of these very expensive guys. So for me, I just don't really see myself going down there and getting Raquel Pennington where I can go up and get some of these absolute studs in the high range up there in the 9K range. Weezy, what is your fighter to fade for the slate?
Yeah, I'm going to be going with Impa Kasanganay. He's got the 7th highest salary, but the 17th highest inside the distance prop. So there's a huge gap there. And I also just hate this matchup stylistically for Impa. Carlston Harris is very hard to score DraftKings points against. I see very little finishing upside as well for Impa. And since Carlston's style is so grinding, I want to point out that Harris only allowed 0.75 DraftKings points a minute in his debut to Aguilera. So that's, it's going to be hard for him to score points. Harris was there for like over 7 minutes, and I think Aguilera landed 1 significant strike. So yeah, definitely not the kind of fighter that I want as an opponent if I'm paying up for a favorite. And with Kasanganay, I think the salary is something like 8,900. So yeah, I'm going to be fading Impa.
Yep, I don't disagree there. I'm on the Harris side myself. AJ, what is your fighter to fade for this week?
Kasanganay as well. You look at his win equity, it's basically a 50-50 fight per the betting odds. And the way I would see him putting up a big score would be a finish. I mean, yeah, he's got some decent volume, but you look at his resume, he actually doesn't have a single win by knockout. Not to say that the guy doesn't hit hard at all and that he can't knock somebody out. It's just, that the numbers say otherwise. And Harris, I'm not a big fan of his game. I actually think he's pretty one-dimensional. I think in fights where he can't get the fight to the ground with consistency, he'll run into a wall. But, he is a really tough guy. Kasanganay, I'd be shocked if he submitted Harris. Harris is a much better submission grappler, in my opinion, higher pedigree, just much more dangerous. And then it's always interesting whenever you got an underdog, well, a slight underdog, albeit, but, Harris actually has a much better wins inside the distance line than Kasanganay does. And to me, that just means that Kasanganay is just a clear pass. If I don't think his finishing equity is that high, and then couple that with his win equity not even being that high for his price point, to me, it's an easy fade. I think that the other mentions that you guys threw out there, I cannot dispute them at all. But Kasanganay was where my mind went when you brought up this category initially.
Yep, Impa is definitely somebody that stuck out to me. I mean, just take a look at the line, right? Like Carlston Harris is like plus 100. I saw him like minus 103 on one book as well. I think that line is going to continue to close up, to be honest, throughout the week. Anything else stick out to you guys in terms of fading fighters? All right, so we will move on to the next section here, and we'll go with our favorite dog. Yeah, really looking forward to hear what you guys have to say. There's a lot of dogs that stuck out for me. Really hard to pick one myself, but we'll kick it right to AJ again. AJ, who is your favorite dog for this week?
Yeah, I might as well double down on that last fight. Right? I got to go with Carlton Harris, a slight underdog, albeit, but I think by the time we approach fight time, he could be a favorite. Much better submission grappler, in my opinion. Really haven't seen Impa tested a lot in defensive grappling sequences. He was taken down by Joaquin Buckley a couple fights ago. He was also taken down a few times on the Contender Series. He was even reversed in his first stint there. And there's just a chance that his experience is just too much. His submission grappling is too much. There's no reason for me to look at Impa's skill set and say that he could defend aggressive submission attempts from the front headlock position against a guy like Harris. So he's a clear value play, in my opinion, as are a lot of other guys. But I do feel like I could trust him a bit more to fight a hard 3 rounds and look for the finish all the way through. Whereas there's some other fighters that are on the slate that are more so first round finish reliant. And I'm just not as confident that if the fight does get out of the first round, that they could come through and even just win. So there's some other options that have equity, but I do think that Harris stands head and shoulders above for me the most, considering his value.
Luke, who is your favorite dog for this week?
Yeah, I don't want to repeat everything AJ just said, but Carlston Harris at 7.3 is my favorite as well, just based on the odds value. You touched on it. I don't think his ITD line in terms of odds is great, but to your point, I mean, Impa just really hasn't faced like an all-encompassing wrestler grappler archetype. Like, I don't think Harris is like a powerhouse wrestler. I don't think he's an elite grappler, but I think he's above average in both capacities. And I think we're going to get some general questions answered in that capacity as well. So at 7.3, in a guy who I think is going to maximize his win condition, he's my favorite dog of the week, coupled with the fact that in maximizing that win condition, that theoretically limits Impa's best path in the fight, which is, a mid-range boxing type affair as well. So I like Harris.
Sounds good. Weezy, who is your favorite dog for this week?
Yeah, I was going to go with Carlston Harris as well. That was the easiest pick for me. But what I just kind of pivoted off of that a little bit, and I decided to go with Nick Motta. And it's only because Motta is priced as a dog on DraftKings. He was supposed to fight Jim Miller, priced at 7,900. Now he's a minus 300 favorite, and you could get him for 7,900. He's got the fifth best inside the distance line on the card. He's got a short notice opponent in Vancamp, who's making his UFC debut. This is a guy I'm going to have a lot of. There's great finishing upside here. Short notice opponent. Really, really, really cheap price for a guy that's minus 300. So yeah, I'm going to have a ton of Motta here. I just can't see not being exposed to him a lot.
Yep, for sure. I think he's going to be one of the more popular fighters on the slate just due to the fact that he's like a minus 300 favorite, and he's very, very cheap there. For me, my favorite dog is going to be Carlston Harris as well for all the same things you guys mentioned. I think Carlston Harris has some really good upside, really good wrestling, really good grappling as well. I would not be shocked if he's actually able to finish Impa on the mat with a submission. Very good submissions from Carlston Harris. He's a more experienced fighter. He's fought the better competition, and I do think that Carlston Harris has a very good chance to potentially get a finish here. So I do like him there. Anything else stick out to you guys in terms of dogs?
There's just so many this week that I liked. It was hard to pick one, but Harris was the most obvious one for me too.
Yeah, I do want to throw out a couple on there and hear you guys' thoughts are. Anybody? Gustavo Lopez. Any interest in Gustavo Lopez 7,800 this week?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that Alateng Lopez fight's being overlooked quite a bit, especially for DFS purposes. They both score a lot of points per minute, and they both wrestle a lot.
To Weezy's point, real quick, too, I mean, a couple with both coming from traditional wrestling backgrounds. I mean, both guys are willing to let their hands fly. Their defense isn't great. I think that could actually be a low-key, like really sneaky, just general fight to target on the slate as well.
Yeah, you take a look at Gustavo Lopez. He has a 92% finish rate. So when he's winning, he is finishing fights, and Alateng can definitely crack himself. So yeah, Gustavo Lopez was somebody else that did stick out to me in terms of a live dog there. So let's move on to our favorite GPP play for GPP. We're looking at high upside. We're looking at a high ceiling, a fighter that can potentially win you a tournament. And let's start with Weezy. What is your favorite GPP play for this week?
GPP play is going to be Ion Cuțelaba, the second best inside the distance line on the card. And you look at him, and I think he's the seventh highest salary, and you're getting the second best inside the distance line. So there's a lot of value there. There's grappling upside with Cuțelaba. There's finish upside with Cuțelaba, and he's scoring 3.78 DraftKings points a minute. So he's very active when he's in the cage. And because of that activity, he tends to get people out of there early when he does beat them. So I think this is just a great fight to target. Cuțelaba is a great finisher in his own right. So yeah, I think Cuțelaba has a lot of value up there in that 9,000 range in terms of what you're getting with the finishing equity that comes along with a guy like that.
Yeah, Ion Cuțelaba is like the definition of a GPP play, right? He's going to go out there. He's going to look for that finish. I think it's like a 93% finish rate. So I'm just going to kick it to myself here. And I'm with you, Weezy. I do like Ion Cuțelaba quite a bit in terms of a tournament play here. It's hard to really, trust him in cash because, he has no gas tank. If he does get out of the first round, I do have some serious concerns. But with that said, Devin Clark has been finished in all 5 of his losses. I believe 2 coming by knockout, 3 coming by submission. And I think if Ion Cuțelaba does win, there's a very good chance that it is in the first round. And I actually think, he's a much better fighter. But the only thing, like I said, is the cardio. He does slow down as the fight goes on. But we're looking for upside. We're looking for tournament plays. And I think Ion Cuțelaba, if he does win, it's going to score a ton of points, especially at the price. Like you mentioned, 9,000. There's like, 5 fighters that are priced above him. So, yeah, I think he has some of the best upside on the slate there. AJ, who are you liking for your favorite GPP play?
So I'm going to go a little bit off the board, outside the box. It was a guy that really started to pique my interest just as I started to think more and more about the matchup. That's Dakota Bush at 8,600. I don't see a rhyme or reason why the average player would want to target him. There was nothing about his debut that was exactly stellar. He gassed in that fight, and so of course there's so much to take away. He took it on short notice, but honestly, on the regional scene, I thought his cardio looked pretty solid. And more so, the reason for this play in GPPs is he's reasonably priced, and I don't think a lot of people will play him. The ownership plays a role in my selection here. Of course, there's guys that have more win equity and higher upside in a vacuum, but when I look at this fight with Rong Zhu, I mean, even in his UFC debut against Kazula Vargas, showed bad submission grappling, just kept leaving his neck out there for the guillotine. On the regional scene, I've seen him taken down easily, mounted, controlled. Bush doesn't exactly seem like a powerhouse of a grappler, but he seems like, reasonably technical, sinks and hooks that presented the back, a reasonably dangerous grappler. I think that there's potential here that he could get this fight to the ground. He's training at Glory MMA ahead of this camp with James Krause, which is always good to see, one of the greatest coaches in the sport. And I think he's got a wrestling and grappling advantage. And dare I say, I think he's even got him beat on the feet. I think he could have success with the low kicks. Zhu does not move his head off the center line at all. Bush, I think he could put a pace on him. I think he could overwhelm him early, and I think he could get a finish. So for a guy that I don't think a lot of people will look to target, because there's just not a lot of reason to based on his history in the UFC, I am interested in him, a guy that I do want to be overweight to relative to the field.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind that. I think we don't have ownership projections yet, but I think that this mid range is going to go very overlooked because there's so many great plays up top, right? So I kind of think how people are going to construct their lineups, and how I'm planning on doing a lot of it is going to be the stars and scrubs. So if you do want to get a little bit different, play some of these guys in this mid range like a Dakota Bush, because Dakota Bush definitely has the upside, and I do think he'll be one of the lower owned fighters in terms of a favorite there. So I don't hate that whatsoever. The upside's definitely there, and I do think it'll be low owned for sure. And then, Luke, what is your favorite GPP play for this week?
I'm going with Tony Gravely at 9.2K as maybe a quasi-leverage play. I'm not 100% sure where ownership is going to be in this top range, but I think people are going to flock to, Sarukian, Jackson, Cuțelaba at 9K. I definitely think all of those are obviously very viable too, but I think in terms of being maybe a bit more different in that upper range, I guess that's kind of where I'm looking to Gravely in his 2 UFC wins. He scored 138 points and 110 points, and even in the 110.1 he scored in a decision as well. Strong wrestling background, gets a lot of takedowns, good amount of control time, shown to have submission acumen on the ground, good ground and pound as well. Think his boxing hands have come a long way over the years to boot, and with Maness primarily being a boxer, assuming that Gravely comes out and wrestles, don't think he necessarily needs to, but I think that's definitely his ability to maximize his win conditions fight. I think he should be able to wrestle this dude with ease. He should be able to pass. We've seen Maness give his back before. So on a 15 fight slate, like I said, with maybe some of the other people flocking to some of the other guys in this range, I think Gravely could be a decent pivot play. So I definitely think at the price he can 10x as well.
Yep, I like Gravely a lot this week myself. Any other plays that stuck out to you guys?
I really like AJ's play on Dakota Bush. I think he might be very, very sneaky there. I think it's actually a decent fight for Dakota Bush, and to a lot of the points he brought up with, just kind of the no game log didn't look great in his debut, but his path is wrestling and grappling. That's where he has a clear edge. I think 8.6 Bush is sneaky solid for GPPs.
Yeah, and I like that play too, because one of the things when I research for this show to get ready for it, one of the things I do is I try to find inside the distance lines and first round lines on everybody, because that's kind of how you can find what fighters might be overowned, underowned. And there's not even lines available on best fight odds for the Bush Rong fight for some reason. So, just in that respect, I wasn't even looking at that fight because I didn't have any metrics to go off of. So yeah, that fight could be underowned, and then everything that he said about Bush's wrestling on the regional scene could lead him to have a high score. So love that call as well.
Thanks, guys. Sorry. Go ahead, Brady.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say honorable mention. I think Aaron Blanchfield is worth some shots in GPPs as well. I think, as we mentioned, Tarukian and Jackson have high upside amongst others. Luke brought up Gravely, but when I look at Blanchfield, I think she's going to be the lowest owned of the crew because she doesn't have any game log, and people just won't exactly know what a DraftKings performance out of her looks like. But we've done our homework. She is a grappling based fighter, and it's just a matchup I look at. It's like everything you could do, I could do better. Alpar, she wants fights to the ground, but Blanchfield's a much higher pedigree submission grappler, much more dangerous. So when I look at this fight, when I visualize it, I just think that it's going to go to the ground, and then Blanchfield will be able to have her way. She could reverse, she could take her back, and she could get a quick submission. So it's nice to see Blanchfield get a much more favorable UFC debut, because that first booking that she had against Dubon, I did not like that spot for her. This spot, I think, is much more favorable. So I think Blanchfield has the potential to go out here and get a spectacular finish.
Yeah, Blanchfield is somebody I was going to bring up and ask you guys about. Yeah, I think she's someone that's very interesting. Like you mentioned, yeah, I think she's going to be the lowest owned out of the bunch up there. And she definitely has, probably the same upside as a lot of them, because she's going to take this fight down to the mat. I'm with you. I think she's better in every single aspect of the fight game against Sarah Alpar. So yeah, Blanchfield is definitely somebody I have my eye on, especially considering she's, again, probably one of the lowest owned out of the bunch up there. All right, so moving on to the favorite cash game play for this week. So we're looking for somebody that's safe. We're looking somebody for a nice floor. We'll start with Luke. Who is your favorite cash game play for this week?
Yeah, no surprises. I'm going Sarukian 9.6, especially on a slate, to your point, Brady, where I think you can definitely even pay down. Not in love with the general mid-range here. So I think there's just multiple constructions where you can pay up for a 9.6. Supposed to win the fight roughly 90% of the time. Sixth best ITD line on the slate. Yago's worst ITD line on the slate. I think he's the safest play on the slate.
Yep, with you there. Weezy, what is your favorite cash play for this week?
Yeah, my second favorite is Montel Jackson. I think that he just gets the job done. He's got a great inside the distance line, high win probability. But I'm going with Nick Motta again. At 8,300 for minus 300, that's all the salary savings that you need in order to get the guys. All you got to do is punt once, and then you can get one mid-range guy and then three guys above 8,800, and Nick Motta will allow you to do that at 7,900 for a minus 300 favorite. It's just a great starting piece. It's almost like a free square in order that you can go from there, build a lot of good lineups around that starting point where you don't have to give up a ton of salary, and you can get some of those guys up above 8,800, 8,900.
Yep, agree there. And then AJ, what is your favorite cash play for this week?
I got to go with Tukin also, because when I look at his upside from a DraftKings perspective, we don't necessarily need him to finish to feel confident that he could put up a big score. He's coming off a performance where he landed 10 takedowns against a guy who's a reasonably talented wrestler and scrambler in Matthew Favola. And when we watch Thiago's fight, I mean, this isn't exactly a secret on him, but he gasses in fights where he's even able to control the tempo. He gets gassed often, and Tarukian will push a pace on you. So I actually think that Tarukian has a lot of takedown upside here. Giagos only defends takedowns at a rate of 50%. He's getting taken down by guys like Damir Hadzovic, who's not nearly as good of a wrestler or athlete. Sarukian, Drakkar Klose, a decent wrestler, but not on Tarukian's level. And I do think that Tarukian, his record doesn't necessarily suggest it, but going back on tape, he was threatening Favola from the front headlock position. Giagos does give up his back. He does gas. I think there's some potential here that Tarukian could get a late finish, but even if he doesn't, I think he's safe to get up over 100 points. Best chance to win on the slate. And again, he's only plus 150 to win inside the distance. So that's 40%. It's not as if it's completely out of reach by any means. So I think we're all, in agreement there. I think that he's a very strong cash game consideration.
Yep, he will 100% be in my cash lineup. But the guy I did go with, I'm with Weezy. I think Nick Motta, 7,900. So like you mentioned, 7,900. He's minus 310 on the money line. Some books is even wider. I'm not going to go, crazy with. I watched tape on Vancamp. I actually was kind of impressed with what I saw. But, something interesting about the Vancamp side is he's actually coming down a weight class for some reason on short notice. I don't really get that. I kind of want to see how Vancamp does look on the scales. But, coming in on short notice, cutting down to a weight class you haven't been at in like the last 6 fights, I think it's going to be a very tough ask here. I think Motta has a very good chance of even knocking him out. So I went with Motta in terms of a cash play. I don't think I'm going to go all that crazy on it in terms of tournaments, but I think for cash, tons of line value there. You can't really argue that. So Motta is the guy I went with. But yeah, I'm with you guys as well. Sarukian is going to be my cash lineup for sure. Any other guys stick out to you guys in terms of cash?
I think Montel Jackson is fine as well. Second biggest favorite on the card, massive to win inside the distance line. And you brought up another a weight class discrepancy. I mean, JP Buys got knocked out at flyweight by Bruno Silva. Jackson hits really hard for bantamweight standards, and he's got an 8-inch reach. I think he's a better wrestler, and he's a more proven guy and more prepared. So I think there's cash game constructions where you could fit not just Tarukian, but you could also fit Jackson in there as well. It might get a little janky in a spot or two, but I think you could make it happen.
Yep, for sure. Sunsu in the chat. What is up, Sunsu? The Chicago connection rolls. There you go. There you go. Melon in the chat as well. Nasty in the chat. Thank you guys for hanging out. We will be moving on now, and we're going to go to our favorite value play. So favorite value play, Uncle Weezy, what do you got for us for some value here?
Yeah, so we already went over this one with Carlston Harris. I mean, 7,300. I like him to win the fight. I like him to grapple. We've never seen Impa fight somebody with a grappling pedigree like Harris before, with somebody with a style like Harris before. And one of the things that I brought up on the Balls Deep breakdown that I did on this fight is that, Carlston Harris was a Brave CF champion 1 year before Impa even started training MMA. So I just don't like this matchup for Impa. It's hard to ask anybody to fight somebody with Carlston Harris's style. You add in the fact that he's giving up 0.75 DraftKings points a minute and has allowed one significant strike in 7 minutes of cage time and has a 90% striking defense. I just think it's going to be impossible for Impa to score points against this guy, and that he's going to get a veteran lesson from a guy like Carlston here. So, yeah, 7,300. He's going to be in a lot of my cash lineups, I'll tell you that.
Luke, who are you liking this week in terms of value?
I'm going Devin Clark at 7.2K. Just off the top, I think there's general salary-based value on it. He's only roughly 45% implied to just win the fight in general. Obviously, his floor is incredibly low. As Cuțelaba, round one finisher, one of the bigger favorites on the slate, one of the bigger round one odds on the slate as well. But I think it's important to note that Cuțelaba's only won 2 fights that have gotten out of the first round in 21 pro fights of his entire career. And I think Clark is reliable to have the much better gas tank. He's actually probably one of the better wrestlers, I would say, that Cuțelaba has fought to, who is consistent to wrestle. And it's not as if we haven't seen Cuțelaba out wrestled either. I mean, Antigulov took him down 3 times. We even saw Dustin Jacoby land a takedown towards the end of the fight. I mean, the guy just gets really, really tired. And over a pretty large sample size of Cuțelaba, he's just consistent to do what he's going to do. He is going to empty the gas tank. He's going to try to get you out of there. Now, I think it's definitely a very live outcome. Don't get me wrong. But if he doesn't, Devin Clark, I think after round one, assuming he doesn't get 10-8, it becomes probably like a -150, -200 favorite in this fight, most likely. So at 7.2K on a guy who's only implied to win the fight 45% of the time, who has a wrestling path, maybe even a sneaky finishing path if Cuțelaba is just completely gassed. If you go back to Cuțelaba's fight with Glover Teixeira, obviously Teixeira is a much better submission grappler than Devin Clark. But I mean, at the end of the day in that fight, he absolutely had nothing left. As soon as Teixeira caught a kick, got him down, passed him easily, gave his back mount, finished within, I think, less than the 30 to 45 second sequence. So I do think there's actually some sneaky finishing upside on Devin Clark in the gas Cuțelaba. So I like him at 7.2 if he can survive the barrage.
Yeah, that's a very interesting way of looking at it, because like you mentioned, if Cuțelaba does not finish Devin Clark, there's a very good chance that Devin Clark can win those next 2 rounds, maybe even get a late finish himself. So I do like that. AJ, what is your favorite value play for this week?
I got to go with Nikolas Motta at 7,900. I know he's going to be extremely chalky, but these are just one of these long-term value plays that I'd like to capitalize on. And it's not about whether it happens or it doesn't. It's just a good spot. It's and I'm willing to see what happens. He's also got a good wins inside the distance line. And as you expressed, there are some concerns. Vancamp's going to be larger than him. Potentially he could have some success early. I'm not exactly sold on Motta's defensive grappling, but he's a much more polished striker, in my opinion. I think he has knockout potential here, sneaky knockout potential. So on one hand, I don't think he'll be as popular, say, other value plays that we had in the past that, say, have DraftKings historics. But since Motta doesn't, he's a debuting fighter, didn't exactly perform stellarly on his Contender Series performance. He can maybe go a little bit under owned, although I do think he'll be pretty popular. He's a guy that I'll consider cash game GPPs. I think he's the best value play on the slate.
100% cannot argue that. For me, my value play is going to be Ryan Spann, 7,100. You get a $2,000 savings off of the main event favorite, Anthony Smith. And I think Spann's going to have a ton of success in this fight and even potentially get a finish early. Again, I mentioned the concerns of, what happens when this fight gets to the third round, to the fourth round, or so on and so forth. But I think Ryan Spann has a very good chance of finishing the fight early here. Anthony Smith has actually been finished like 11 times in his career. I think he's been finished like 8 or 9 times by knockout. So it would not shock me in the slightest if Ryan Spann was able to get a finish. I think he has a route to, to get tons of takedowns here. Anthony Smith, no takedown defense, not really a good get-up game, or really doesn't make an effort to get up as well. So I can see Ryan Spann racking up control time. But again, if he does not get that finish, that's where I do start to have concerns. But, I think he's going to be, winning a lot of the minutes of this fight up until, like I said, maybe he makes a mistake, maybe he does gas out. But I personally think there is a very good chance that he does finish just within the first 2.5 rounds. So yeah, Ryan Spann, 7,100, $2,000 savings. I do like that quite a bit in terms of getting action on that main event. Anything stick out to you guys in value plays? Anything else?
Yeah, I just wanted to say how good of an idea the Devin Clark value play is. I wanted to point out something for the raw DraftKings points per minute stat that I keep in my spreadsheets. The third highest scorer on this particular slate happens to be Devin Clark. The highest scorer is Gravely at 5.41 points a minute. The second highest scorer, Montel Jackson, 4.85 points a minute. Both of those are really high. And then the third highest is Devin Clark at 4.09 points a minute. And Devin Clark's only allowing 2 points a minute. So he's actually scoring 2 points, 2 DraftKings points for every one that he allows. So that grappling heavy, wrestling heavy style that Clark brings, if he does survive that first round, there's going to be a lot of value in Devin Clark at 7,200. That's a great call, Luke.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks for pointing that out, Luke. I honestly wasn't even thinking about that, but yeah, especially hearing the stats from Weezy, I think that's definitely something to consider there. So we will move on to the final section. Then we'll move on to our lineups and give our picks. But we have our dart throws. This is my favorite part of the show. So for dart throws, we're taking a look at somebody that's probably going to be low owned and somebody that can potentially, take down a tournament for you. So we'll start with Weezy. Weezy, who is your favorite dart throw for this week?
Yeah, I'm going to be going with Brady's favorite fighter, Antonio Arroyo, 6,900. Brady loves this guy. He's going to be so pissed off he kicked it to me first because I definitely took the mic right out of his hands here. He should be low owned because he's kind of a bum, actually. But Buckley isn't a wrestler, and that is his kryptonite. Buckley has been working on his wrestling. I'm sure it's getting better. I know he has been training wrestling, but he's not exactly the prototype of fighter that's going to, like a Darren Wynn, that's going to hold down Arroyo and really kind of expose his biggest weakness. And both of these guys throw with a lot of power. I think it's actually should be lined a lot closer because I think these guys are actually very similar fighters. But since Buckley isn't a wrestler, I think the line should be closer. The 12th best inside the distance line is Antonio Arroyo, but I think he's priced 26th. So, you're getting a lot of finish upside there at that price. And if you want to get some of these 9,000 and above guys in your lineup, you're going to have to punt at least once. And I think Arroyo's some really good value down there. Sorry, Brady, I didn't mean to steal it from you, dude.
No, it's okay. I definitely like that. I mean, the price is ridiculous, right? 6,900. I went back and watched tape on Arroyo, and I was extremely impressed. Like, this guy, he's really good. He is really talented, but the problem is he's talented for about 2 or 3 minutes. He has the worst gas tank I've ever seen, but if he does win, it's going to probably be in the first round, right? Like, Buckley has been knocked out 3 times. I don't think Arroyo's ever been knocked out as well. I think all of his losses that have finished inside the distance were by submission. Buckley has no submissions on his record. So yeah, Uncle Weezy, I'm definitely with you there. Although I'm not a big fan of Antonio Arroyo, that price tag just seems way off to me. Luke, what is your favorite dart throw for this week?
Yeah, traditionally for the dart throws, I'm kind of going down, but I'm actually going way up this week. I'm going Mrs. Erin Blanchfield at 9.4K, kind of for a lot of the reasons that AJ brought up before. Girl's making her debut, 22 years old, no game log. I think your casual DFS player isn't going to be familiar with her or just her game in general. I think she is by far the best submission grappler that Alpar has fought. I know Alpar comes from a wrestling background, but Blanchfield is going to put this girl in some really tricky spots. I've seen much lesser girls get to Alpar's back before. If Blanchfield gets into even moderate dominant positions, I feel very strongly that she is going to be able to win this fight. I know her inside the distance line does not translate that, but I personally think that line is very off. And because she has the worst inside the distance line at the 9.4K range, I don't think you're going to see much ownership on Blanchfield here. And kind of going back to the whole 15 fight slate narrative, you know, you got to be different. You got to take your stabs, got to make your shot, you know, plant your flag in the sand per se. And I think Blanchfield does have tournament finishing upside, and you're not going to chop and split with 10,000 people in the scenario that it does happen. Not to mention, I think she has some finishing upside on the feet here. You know, she head kick KO'd Victoria Leonardo. She dropped Brogan Walker Sanchez in her last fight. Her hands have come a long way in the last 3 to 4 years. So, and we've just seen Alpar's defense be absolutely horrible as well. Got knocked out in her last fight too. So I think Blanchfield is actually very sneaky at 9.4K to win you a tournament.
Yep, 100%. Somebody I'm definitely looking at myself. You mentioned inside the distance line, which I saw yesterday. It was like plus 285, and I think today is like plus 260. I think there's a very good chance that she can definitely finish Alpor. So I'm definitely going to be looking at that line in terms of a bet. But yeah, Sarah, you know, Erin Blanchfield, 9,400. Like you mentioned, she's going to be probably the lowest owned in that 9K range. I do think she has some of the same upside as some of the other guys up there. AJ, what is your favorite dart throw for this week?
Yeah, so going along with the trend of you know, fighters that, you know, could finish the fight early, finishing upside, a guy that I don't really trust a lot because he has dropped the ball many times is a big favorite. But Mike Rodriguez at 7,400. I mean, he's got a 5-inch reach advantage here over Nchukwi. And unlike a lot of his previous matchup, he doesn't have to worry about being out grappled here. I do think that he's got better tools at range than Nchukwi does. He doesn't control range excellently. It does Rodriguez, so I should mention that caveat. But Nchukwi, a thing that stands out for me about his game is he's just very strong and densely muscled. But going along with that, the trade-off is he's a bit slow. The commentators pointed that out with the Park fight last time out. And going back on his Contender Series fight, I mean, he was getting outlanded on significant strikes by an opponent that he had a 10-inch reach advantage over. So I definitely do think that there's some merit here to Rodriguez just, you know, landing early, and maybe that means a finish. Nchukwi did look like he was hurt a couple times there on that Contender Series fight, so I'm not sold that his durability is exactly rock solid. I do think that he's a guy that, you know, I want some exposure to as well. He could potentially just melt Rodriguez late with pace, but Rodriguez is a guy I just feel like a lot of people will be off of because he has dropped the ball so many times, but he's got a legitimate chance to win for the betting odds. And his, you know, wins inside the distance line is very reasonable for a guy that is at this price point. So total dart throw, he probably, you know, he might not come through again, but if he does come through, I don't think many people will be on him. And I think he could come through in a first or second round finish because that has historically been the only way he has been winning fights is by first or second round knockout with one or two submissions in there, but mostly knockout.
Yep, Mike Rodriguez, one of the more unreliable guys in the game. 100% finish rate for Mike Rodriguez. He has never won by decision. Like you mentioned, more experienced fighter, better competition. He's going to have a size advantage. Tafon coming up to light heavyweight here. I think he's going to have like a 5-inch reach advantage, like a 4-inch height advantage. So yeah, definitely don't mind that as well. Want to shout out to people in the chat. Billy, what is up, Billy? Hanging out with us. Boston Nick in the chat. Thank you guys for hanging out. Boston Nick saying 31 likes, 71 here. Smash it like a porn star. Okay, don't know what that means, but yep, smash the like button, guys. All right, for me, my dart throw, it's gonna be a fight we have not talked about yet. It's gonna be Mandy Baum, who is 8,000. So I'm a big fan of fading Ariana Lipski. She has a 42% takedown defense, and she's been taken down in every single one of her UFC fights except the Luana Carolina fight that lasted about a minute. And, you know, Mandy Baum, I think the striking is actually going to be pretty competitive. I was very impressed with what I saw. But I think a big aspect of this fight is going to be if Mandy Baum can get the takedown. Because Lipski, no takedown defense. And I think that Baum showed a pretty solid ground game, multiple submissions on her record. And Lipski has been finished multiple times, a lot of those being on the mat. So a fight that I think in general is not going to be very high owned. I think Mandy Baum could be somebody really to look at. 8K. I think like I said, I think the top range, the 9K and up, and then the bottom range is going to be very high owned. I think this middle range, this mid range is not going to have much ownership, and especially this fight. So Mandy Baum, I did like what I saw. Of course, she is making her UFC debut. There are some concerns there. Lipski has fought the much better competition, but I think Baum somebody to definitely, take a look at in terms of a dart throw there. Anything else sticking out to you guys?
I think that's solid though. Brady, I think these girls are going to chuck some heat. I don't think it's the highest level of fight in the world. A lot of people are probably going to pass over it. It's a chick fight. It's in that mid-range, probably a lot of stars and scrubs in there, what you touched on. But I do think there could be some finish equity in this fight that's uber sneaky. So I like it.
Yeah, it's probably like the only women's fight that I have much interest in, if anything, on this slate here. All right, so we're about towards the end here. So guys in the chat, first of all, if you can leave a like, that'd be much appreciated. Second off, if you have any questions, start typing them in the chat. We'll get to them very soon. But first, we will get to our lineups. And while we are talking about our lineups, I will pull up the results from last week. We're going to see who won last week. So we'll start with Weezy. Weezy, what is your lineup for this week?
All right. For this week, going from most expensive to cheapest, I will be going with Montel Jackson at 9,500, Anthony Smith at 9,100, Cuțelaba at 9,000. I'll go Nick Motta at 7,900, Carlston Harris at 7,300, and then Brady's favorite fighter, Antonio Arroyo, 6,900.
Sounds good. My favorite fighter for sure. So I'll go next, starting with the most expensive, ending with the least expensive. So I'll go Montel Jackson up top, 9,500. I'll go Tony Gravely, 9,200. Ian Cuțelaba, 9,000. Then I'm going to go Nicholas Motta, 7,900. Carlston Harris, 7,300. Then finish it with Ryan Spann, 7,100. Luke, what is your lineup for this week?
Off the top, I did not check DK and saw that Motta was 7.9, so you guys might have a leg up on me there in that. But starting at the top, I'm going Tsarukyan, Jackson, Gravely, Carlston, Harris, Clark, and Ryan Spann.
So, yeah, no Motta. That's going to be interesting. We'll see if AJ, do you have Motta in your lineup?
Of course I do. I have I have Motta in there, going from most expensive to least expensive. Tsarukyan, Jackson. I will actually go with Bush, then Motta, Harris, and then last, everybody's favorite guy on the show is Antonio Arroyo at 6,900.
There you go. You never know, Luke. Like Motta could very well lose, and then you'll have a huge edge there. But we'll take a look at how we did last week. So the week before last week, I got first place. Weezy got last place. I believe the very first week we did this, Weezy got first place. I got last place. So we're switching back and forth between first and last. Once again, I got last place. I got 477.9 DraftKings points, and all of our lineups were very, very close. I think all three of our lineups were like one player away. What got me was Charles Jourdain in my lineup. It was nice to see that Julian Erosa all of a sudden has a chin. But yeah, there was a very close and competitive between the three of us this week. Second place was Luke with 503.94. He had Shore, Aspinall, Roundtree, Barriot, McCann, and Zawada. And then Weezy, the winner, his second first place win since we've been doing the show. He had Shore, Aspinall, Barriot, Brunson, McCann, and Zawada. So yeah, very, very close. He had 510.43 DraftKings points. So Uncle Weezy, congratulations to you. How does it feel to have first place?
Yeah, this is if I could get like a printout of that, I'm gonna put it right behind me, because every time I beat you guys, I got to put it up on the board and I got to say that I had a good week. I'm hoping we could keep it rolling this week because we gave a lot of great tips today, and I know that a lot of the stuff that I'm doing. You guys talked me into some really great plays as well. So, this show is making me better at DraftKings. So I got you guys to thank for that.
Yeah, I mean, I love this show. I hope people love it as well. Great, sharp panel on here. Glad to talk it up with you guys. We'll go through our quick picks real quick, and then we'll hit up the chat and then head out of here. We'll start with me first. So I'm going to start with Ryan Spann, underdog in the main event, going with Ian Cuțelaba co-main event. Nicholas Motta, we'll go with Mandy Baum, Armin Tsarukyan, Joaquin Buckley, Mike Rodriguez, Raquel Pennington, Tony Gravely, Rong Zhu. We'll go with Montel Jackson, Aaron Blanchfield, Carlston Harris, Alateng, Heili, and then Hannah Goldie. Weezy, who are you picking for this week?
All right, I'm just going in the order of tapology here. I'm going to go Anthony Smith. I'll go Cuțelaba. I'll go Baum, Tsarukyan, Gravely, Buckley. I hate to pick against the Hoyo, but I'm picking Buckley. I'm going to pick Rodriguez, Pennington, Bush, Motta, Jackson, Blanchfield, Harris, Alateng, and Goldie.
Okay, Luke, what is your picks for this week?
All right, out the top going Anthony Smith, Clark, Baum, Sarukian, Gravely, Arroyo based on odds value, Tafon, Pennington, Bush, Motta, Jackson, Blanchfield, Harris, Lopez, and Whitmire.
And AJ, what are your picks for this week?
Smith, Cuțelaba, Lipke, Sarukian, Buckley, Nchukwi, Pennington, Gravely, Bush, Jackson, Blanchfield, Kasanganay, Lopez, and Goldie.
Sounds good. So let's hit up some questions here. Let's see what you guys have to say in the chat. We'll start with Clint. He says, my question for the panel is, Brady, why do you hate me and why are you disrespecting my girl Lipsky? Clint, first of all, I don't hate you, but second of all, I'm not the biggest fan of Lipsky. I do try to tend to fade her more often than not, but hey, maybe she can get it done. But yeah, I don't hate you. I don't really hate Lipsky as well. I think she has a terrible takedown defense. I think Baum can get her down to the mat and potentially get a finish there. Let's see what we got here. Let's give this question to AJ. For a newbie, how does a 15-fight card affect your strategy compared to a 9-fight card?
Well, it affects it tremendously. I mean, I'm already a high-volume, multiple lineup type of player as is, but with more fights becomes more opportunities to be contrarian. So it's all about gauging ownership and deciding whether or not I want to take an overweight or underweight stand based on the projected ownership. So the approach is similar, but we also have more options on the slate. And so I think that'll widespread the ownership a bit more than, say, if we have less fights. So I think that on a week like this, assuming even if a fight or two gets scrapped, I think the likelihood of somebody taking down first place in a big GPP solo is much greater because of the abundance of options. And even on a 9-fight slate, the card that we had a couple weeks ago, I believe the person that won first place took it down solo. So even on a small fight, or a card with less fights, you could still be really contrarian and you could still come in first place. So I wouldn't, in general, I don't really let the number of fights on the slate really affect my approach to the slate in general. It's all about, again, that ownership and then what exactly I want to do with it.
Yep, for sure. Weezy, I'm curious to hear. I know it's early. I know it's a Tuesday, but what is your strategy for this week compared to a card where, say you have 9 fights compared to this week where you have 15?
Yeah, it's so if I'm, kind of just eyeing things, I tend to take the same approach that AJ takes when I multi-enter and that. I want to see what everybody else is doing first. Then I want to look at the inside the distance lines, the first round finish lines and the money lines, and then just kind of figure out which guys I want to over-own in comparison to the ownership that's projected and which guys I want to under-own, because I'll use those lines as the most perfect information that's available at the time. But if it does get down to where you're almost at like 8 fights, I will most likely reduce the amount of lineups that I'll put in, and I'll just kind of try to focus on if there are some fights that stick out in terms of my Draftkings statistics, where there are fighters that look like they're going to be scoring a lot more, or they're just higher paced fighters. I try to target those fights in particular when there is a smaller amount of fights on the card. That's kind of how I do it. But everything that AJ just said is kind of the same strategy that I employ. If I'm going to put 150 lineups in, I need to have an idea of what the field is doing first. And then I'll look to exploit inefficiencies in that using the betting lines, using the inside the distance lines, using the first round finish lines.
Sounds good. And then we'll finish with Luke. Luke, what is your strategy for this slate compared to a slate that has 9 fights?
Probably just finding and isolating, I would say, at least 2 to 3 spots, I'd say, to be contrarian on and just go significantly overweight there. I think on one of these slates, it's more important to be different and just pick and choose those spots. And conversely, on the other side of the coin, be really confident and convicted in what you want to fade. Traditionally, on these bigger slates, you might have the thought process to say, I just need to spread everything out. But I think that's also what a lot of people want to do. I think you should just look to actually fade a ton of different fights, assuming that you don't think there's much merit to them. I'd say be strong in your conviction both ways.
Sounds good. All right, we're going to end up with letting everybody know where they can find you. We'll start with myself. You can follow me on Twitter, DFS_numbers. YouTube is DFS by the numbers. Lots of content going on throughout the week. Live stream on Friday and Saturday. Weezy, I know you have some stuff going on in terms of throughout the week and also tonight. Where can they find you?
Yeah, find me on Twitter at MMA Weezy. You can find me on YouTube at my channel, Uncle Weezy. I will be going live after the Contender Series tonight, probably at 10:30 p.m. Central is when it's scheduled for my full card breakdown, Just the Tip. At the end of Just the Tip, I will be giving out my ass shaving of the week, one of the most hotly anticipated moments of the MMA week. So we will be doing that tonight. Come check me out there. But I'm always right here on Pub Sports Radio with you guys on Tuesday nights and then Sunday nights with Stat Diggers, 5:15 p.m. Central Time going forward, right?
Yep, moving up 1 hour due to Sunday Night Football. Luke, where can they find you and what do you have going on throughout the week?
Twitter, SWR_betting, patreon.com/SWR betting, bets, content, all that good stuff. dailyfanmma.com. I'm actually providing Contender Series content over there for those guys. So if you're interested in that, hit up dailyfanmma.com.
And then last but not least, AJ, what do you have going on throughout the week and where can they find you?
Yeah, have free content as well as paywall content. I like to give a nice, healthy mix of both. You can subscribe to the mailing list on my website, ajmmabetting.com, for free prize picks selections for the UFC events. Prize Picks, a proud sponsor of the website that I run, as well as Luke's and others as well. It's a really great company. I really think it's a company on the rise, and so I really would recommend players that you do have access to Prize Picks to take advantage of, because there's a lot of great opportunity there. But as far as my socials go, AJ MMA Betting, you can be found there. Twitter, YouTube, Instagram. I'm pretty responsive if you reach out via DMM, have a question or something like that. And yeah, cheers, guys.
Sounds good. So there we have it. If you guys can leave a like on your way out, also subscribe here to Pub Sports Radio. Would really appreciate that. We will see you next week on Tuesday, 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. As always, check out Stat Diggers coming up on Sunday as well. And good luck for UFC Vegas 37. Talk to you guys soon.